Welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a highly structured, intensely focused look at a topic that is honestly as crucial as it gets. We're unpacking the real human realities that often get hidden away inside corporate sustainability reports. You know, when we look at massive skyscrapers, huge highways, or sprawling energy grids, it's so easy to just see the final product. But behind every single steel beam and poured foundation is a workforce. Today, we're going to systematically break down how the world's leading financial and sustainability standards are finally demanding real accountability for the health and safety of those workers.
So, what is the true human cost of building our world? I want you to keep this provocative question right in the back of your mind as we go through this explainer. We really need to shift our mindset today. We're moving away from thinking about abstract buildings and infrastructure and focusing directly on the actual, real people who step onto these job sites every single day. Construction requires intense, substantial manual labor, and the risks, they are incredibly high. Our goal today is to figure out exactly how those risks are measured, managed, and reported.
Okay, let's dive into this. The official SASB standards are going to act as the foundational framework guiding our entire analysis today. Specifically, we're looking at the Engineering and Construction Services Standard. Now, these guidelines are designed to help companies disclose sustainability risks that actually affect their cash flows and their access to capital. So we aren't just talking about, feel-good PR metrics here. We're looking at the hard data that investors use to evaluate a company's true operational health. To cover this efficiently, here's our roadmap. First up, the SASB framework. Second, daily hazards on the job. Third, temporary contract worker risks. Fourth, tracking crucial safety metrics. And fifth, the cost of poor safety. We're going to take you all the way from high-level standards right down to the vital, granular metrics of job site safety.
All right, part one, understanding SASB construction standards. Before we look at the job site itself, we really need to understand the rules of the game. So the SASB standards are now under the stewardship of the ISSB. That's the International Sustainability Standards Board, which is part of the IFRS Foundation. What you need to know is that these are globally recognized sustainability metrics. They carry serious weight. And guys, this isn't some distant pipe dream. Version 2023-12 of this standard is effective for annual periods beginning on or after January 1, 2025. The mandate to hold companies accountable for their workforce using standardized metrics, it's happening right now. Moving on to Section 2, Daily Hazards on the Job. We're going to pivot sharply here from dry accounting standards to the visceral, physical reality of a construction site. The engineering and construction services industry has frankly staggering fatality and injury rates compared to other sectors. Think about the daily hazards these workers face. You've got powered haulage accidents. Imagine massive dump trucks and transport vehicles weaving through a chaotic site. There are brutal heavy machinery accidents involving cranes, excavators, and bulldozers. Fall accidents remain a constant, potentially fatal threat when you're building multi-story structures. And then there's the invisible threat, exposure to hazardous chemicals. This is a uniquely dangerous working environment. It requires constant vigilance because, honestly, a single lapse can literally be a matter of life and death. Which brings us to Section 3, Temporary Contract Worker Risks. I want you to imagine stepping onto one of those chaotic, hazardous sites for the very first time. There is a massive vulnerability gap here.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the standard explicitly demands that companies separate their workforce into two distinct buckets. On one side, we have direct employees. These are individuals directly on the payroll, your full-time and part-time staff. But then on the other side, we have contract employees. These are folks not on the payroll, but managed by the entity. This means independent contractors, people from temp agencies, and labor brokers. By forcing companies to track these two groups separately, the standard makes it impossible to hide the safety records of outsourced temporary labor. It demands a true, unfiltered picture of safety for absolutely everyone on site.
And why is that separation so incredibly vital? Well, because temporary workers are at a demonstrably higher risk. It comes down to a lack of training or industry experience. Think about it. When you take someone who isn't familiar with the unique rhythm of a job site, who doesn't have years of muscle memory working around heavy machinery or hazardous materials, and you drop them into that environment, their risk profile skyrockets. A lack of experience directly translates to severe physical danger. The standard recognizes this specific vulnerability and forces companies to monitor it.
Okay, Section 4, Tracking Crucial Safety Metrics. So how do we actually put a number on these life and death stakes?
Let's demystify a bit of industry jargon. The core metric you absolutely need to know is TRIR, Total Recordable Incident Rate.
But what actually crosses the threshold to become recordable? An incident is recordable if it results in death, days away from work, restricted work, or loss of consciousness. It also includes any significant injury diagnosed by a physician. But most importantly, it includes medical treatment beyond first aid. This strict definition is huge because it stops companies from brushing serious injuries under the rug as just minor scrapes. To make TIRI work, we have to strictly define the alternative, which is first aid. The SASB standard defines this as emergency care or treatment for an injured person before regular medical aid can be provided. This distinction is absolutely crucial for accurate reporting. If a worker just gets a bandage and goes right back to their shift, that's first aid. But if they require a doctor to stitch up a wound or prescribe medication, that crosses the line into medical treatment. That becomes a recordable incident that hits the company's official safety metrics. So, the crucial point here is understanding the great equalizer in these metrics, the number 200,000. When companies calculate their incident rates, they need a baseline so a massive global corporation can be compared fairly against a smaller regional builder. This number, 200,000, represents the total hours that 100 full-time workers would provide annually, assuming they work 40 hours a week for 50 weeks a year. It's basically the standard anchor in all safety reporting. And here is how that builds into the actual formula. Whether a company is calculating their total recordable incident rates or their fatality rate, they use this exact equation. You take the statistic count, the number of actual incidents, multiply it by that baseline of 200,000, and then divide it by the total number of hours worked by all employees in the year. Because of this math, investors and regulators can look at two completely different construction firms and compare them on a perfectly equal playing field. The data simply can't lie. But what actually counts as a work-related incident? Well, the reporting environment is incredibly comprehensive. It's not just the physical location of the job site. It includes injuries involving the employer's equipment or materials, no matter where they're used. It even covers incidents that happen while an employee is traveling, provided they were engaged in work activities for the employer at the time. The standard leaves zero loopholes for companies trying to duck accountability. Finally, Section 5, the cost of poor safety. We've established the human toll and how to measure it. So let's connect those metrics directly back to the financial bottom line. Failing to protect worker health and safety isn't just a moral failure. It is a massive financial risk. Poor safety results in severe fallout. We're talking steep fines and regulatory penalties. Serious incidents trigger huge, one-time extraordinary expenses and legal liabilities from lawsuits. And operationally, health and safety incidents result in major project delays and downtime. This completely inflates project costs and kills profitability. When workers aren't safe, the business itself is quite literally in jeopardy. And this brilliantly illustrates the flip side of that equation. When a company actively invests in training both its permanent and its temporary employees and builds a genuinely strong safety culture, they don't just avoid fines, they actually reduce their overall risk profile and gain a competitive advantage in new project bids. Excellent workforce health and safety statistics prove to clients that a contractor is well managed and reliable. Good safety is fundamentally just good business. Which brings us to the ultimate question we need to walk away with today. If meticulously tracking these SASB metrics, separating out our vulnerable temporary workers, strictly defining medical treatment, and applying this standardized math can literally prevent human tragedy and save a business from financial ruin, how are we actively valuing the people who build our world? These frameworks exist to remind us that sustainability isn't just about the environment. It is absolutely about the workers. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this structured look at the data gives you a brand new perspective the very next time you walk past a construction site. Stay curious and keep learning.